Welcome to the podcast. It's a Monday. We're going to talk racing news with Rod Mullins. And I say racing news because normally we start with NASCAR and, a lot of times we will just cover NASCAR. But we've got to start with NHRA because the drag racing folks were in Bristol all weekend and Rod was there with them. Rod, man, Thunder Valley, I'm sure lived up to its name with all those cars and motorcycles going up and down the track there.
Oh, it did. No doubt about it. This was just such a fun weekend this time around for me. I got to get in to see this. I've been several times before, but this one just meant more to me, I think, than some of the others had because it gave me a chance to kind of see what was going on. Got a chance to see some friends again, meet some new people. But I tell you, after what we saw yesterday in the finals and so forth, there's a lot of people that's kind of, that's kind of hanging around and they're looking to make their move. And yesterday, Tony Schumacher was one of those guys that made his move and he ended up making it to the final round. And then you had your regulars who had been champs there before, Ron Capps, who just suddenly did not make it this time around to the finals and so forth. And then you had Clay Millican, who's his home track. That's what he considers his home track, although he lives 500 miles west of Bristol. He still considers Bristol his home track. He looked like he was destined to get that that number one, that Wally this year, and it didn't happen for him. So there were a lot of things going on. Had a chance to see Tony Stewart drag racing for once. A lot of frustration there with Tony Stewart. Had a chance to see him. Not many people ask him a lot of questions about the ongoing saga over the NASCAR thing, about the charters and so forth. I think a lot of people just figure you don't want to open up a can of worms or a Pandora's box with Tony right now because that's a sore spot probably on him that this team could have, potentially done more, but has not. But it scared me too when he made the comment during the press conference, and that was on Saturday. Made the comment during the press conference Friday or Saturday. He made the comment that he said they asked him what is he trying to do with his race team there at Tony Stewart Racing in the NHRA. He said, "I'm trying to pay the bills every month." That was a little bit of a scary thing to hear that because then you start thinking, okay, somebody didn't ask the question, but still, it's a scary thing to hear. You're folding up shop on the NASCAR side. How much longer is it going to be before you fold up on this end of, racing and so forth? And, it gets back to that same thing again. I talked with a gentleman there, Jerry Jordan from Kicking the Tires, and he and I talked about this. And, one of the things that came out was it's the cost of running a race team. No matter what it is, it's the cost of running a race team. NHRA will go back and they will go back and they'll run old parts. They'll run old things that they have to. They'll do the milling. They'll do what they have to do to be able to bore out a hole or whatever needs to be done there. They bring their shop essentially with them. That is, unless it's, somewhere farther away, but they bring their shop with them and they do a lot of things there on hand right there there at the track. But NASCAR has become such an expensive proposition. And we also heard the rumor this past weekend, too, that Front Row Motorsports supposedly purchased a charter from Stewart Haas Racing for $20 to $25 million. Now, that's wild. That's kind of overpriced, so to speak. It's a scary thing right now. Everything looks and points to the direction that sports is going so well, and especially things are going well in the sport of NASCAR, but we still have that money thing around. We talked about this thing that we talked about here, last week or 2 weeks ago about the money situation and, how it's going to end up and so forth. And Jerry and I both were of agreement. We don't know. We don't know when this thing is going to come down, when it's all going to come down. Are they going to drop the bomb and say, hey, look, we're going to start a union? What's it going to mean? We don't know yet at this point. There's a lot of questions out there. NASCAR's kind of backed off a little bit of one of the things about the charter and extending them like 7 years, I think, of letting them have a charter for something like 7 years. but that's not being greeted very warmly by the NASCAR owners and so forth. But let's get back to this action from this past weekend, though, at Bristol. I saw some great drag racing. Got to see John Force once again. John Force and his awesomeness as he gets out there. I got to see probably the up and coming Austin Prock, who has now taken over a ride on the funny car. He was in Top Fuel last year, but now he's moved over to funny car this year. Budding talent right there. Somebody that's really starting to make his mark. He's won something like 6 or 7 consecutive brackets is what he's won, going back to even last week, and was number 1 there at the end of it and won the Wally there yesterday afternoon. And then you also saw some others in here as well. You saw some of the old guard, perhaps, Antron Brown, Steve Torrance, Brittany Force. They didn't have a lot of luck. Neither did Tony Stewart. But then in turn, I think the one that probably thrilled me more than anything else was the motorcycle race this time around, the motorcycle drags, the pro stock motorcycle. Gage Herrera, he claimed a victory. Wow, he's got a record in there now that just is unreal. And I was going to find that here for you, and I was going to give you that stat on him right there about Herrera. Herrera has 4 wins in 2024, 15 in his career, led wire to wire in the finals, avenging last year's loss at Bristol. And at the same time, he passed Dave Schultz for the most consecutive wins in pro stock motorcycle history, tying Bob Glidden, if you remember that name from the NHRA before, for the most consecutive round wins in NHRA history. And then besides that, we also got to meet someone that I have heard so much about, got to see her in person, Shirley Muldowney. She was named to the Legends of Thunder Valley, and I'm telling you, for her age and so forth, she still got some spunk about her. I think she could go out there and she could race now if she had her chance.
I'm looking at some of these things from your story. I'm looking at the speeds, and I want to relate that to our listeners and viewers out there. Some of these speeds.
Okay.
Because Schumacher, you mentioned he hadn't won. I mean, he hadn't won in a while. It's been a couple years since his last win.
Right.
But he and his win ties him for the most wins at Bristol Dragway was 7 with Ron Capps. It was his 87th career victory, but he hadn't won in 37 races.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now his final winning time was 4.236 seconds, 259.41 miles per hour on his winning run. The funny car, you mentioned Austin Prock, and man, these funny cars, the speeds they're putting up are funny too. 3.989 seconds, 312.42 miles per hour.
Right.
These are just ridiculous numbers. What they're putting up there. I wanted to read those out there just so people can get a sense. I mean, I love, local drag racing, everything else, but these are just bonkers numbers, what you see from these pros and their pro teams.
Well, they had some follow-up races, I'll say this, after the main event yesterday. They were trying to get everything in because of impending rain, which, matter of fact, they hit it right on the head this time because the rain moved in probably around 5 o'clock, 4:30 or 5 o'clock. We would have still been going on with some of the stuff at that time, but we managed to finish up probably about an hour or so before. And they had some of the smaller divisions go in there and some of these other people that compete. And it's more on a weekly basis, so to speak, at the local tracks and so forth. But hey, it's their chance to shine at Bristol. And they had one car that would remind you of the pro stock car that Erica Enders drives or Greg Anderson drives. And it looks like, maybe the body of a Camaro or something, but it's just souped up a little bit more. It's lifted up, the big wheels in the back and so forth, and the guard to make sure the car doesn't flip up when it takes off and everything when it gets so much horsepower. But out of that whole thing, they had a team that even placed better numbers, almost better numbers than what Erica Enders and Greg Anderson pulled off. Here was one. Greg Anderson pulled off, or I should say, Jed Coughlin Jr. pulled off the championship against Greg Anderson with a 6.707 run. That's a second run at 204.94 miles per hour in his car. One of the other teams came in and they won their category after all this, 250 miles an hour. I was shocked. I was sitting there. I think most of the media corps that were there sitting there, we were like amazed that here's these local guys or regional guys, however you want to call them. They hit 250 miles an hour in their car. And then on top of that, here you had, Coughlin, who wins the race at just 204 miles an hour. These guys could have competed against this guy. But it wasn't. It was just one of those categories in the way they had everything set up. But I'll tell you, it was just a fun event altogether this past weekend at Bristol Dragway.
So I was looking up something here, Rod, because I like to. You also put in the story. I love that you put these details in. You put the horsepower, for example, Tony Schumacher's car, and Austin Prock's funny car, 11,000 horsepower,
Yeah.
11,000 horsepower.
Yep.
I drive a Jeep. I was just trying to get a sense. I don't know off the top of my head what my Jeep's horsepower is. Anywhere from 270 to 470, depending, right?
Yeah.
270 to 470 versus 11,000. I can't even imagine what it feels like to put your foot on the gas of something with 11,000 horsepower.
I can't either, but I also can imagine too that you are sort of like in the comedy movies when you see the takeoffs and so forth in some of these movies like Airplane and their face going like this. If they didn't have a helmet on or something, their
Yeah,
face would be
yeah,
flopping, is what it would be. And I mean, this happens so quick, and you're covering, oh my gosh, you're covering so many feet in a second
yeah.
as you take off. And that is just that's hard to kind of comprehend sometimes. But man alive, it's unreal to me. And we did have a couple of cars that blew yesterday. They had some engines that blew, kind of finished everything out. Clay Milliken was one of those. His car blew. I'm trying to think of, there was one more out of that group, but you just saw the explosion. We didn't have any bad wrecks, which I was glad to see that. Everybody came through clean on that. But, the weather had a lot to do with it. I know that Friday and Saturday, it was a lot of heat. The track temperature had got up, I think, as much as 132 degrees or something on Saturday. And then it had cooled off on Sunday because we were expecting rain. But then the sun came out for a little while, heated the track up. And if some of these teams had set up for a colder track, they got surprised because the track had heat in it. And so when the track has heat in it, you get more grip and you're able to kind of hold on there. And sometimes that can be a good thing, and sometimes that can be a bad thing, depending on how you look at it.
Just for you're going a quarter of a mile in 4 or 5 seconds.
Yeah.
If you're going 60 miles an hour down the road, this is easy. I'm just doing the easy math because if you're going on the interstate, you're going 70 or more. But if you're going 60 miles per hour down the road, it takes you 15 seconds to go that quarter of a mile, and they're going in 3 or 4 seconds. I say all this to say for anybody out there, if you're watching or listening to this podcast, you're a racing fan. But when people out there say, "Oh man, driving isn't a sport. All they're doing is driving a car," no, it takes people. It takes men and women with lots of athletic ability to be able to control these cars and be able to do what they do, to go 300 miles an hour down a track.
Well, this goes back to that Randall Cunningham comment that he made years ago about saying that stock car drivers were not athletes. I didn't see much that Randall Cunningham was much of an athlete as far as I'm concerned. I mean, he's quarterback for the Eagles, and yeah, he had a big name and he played for a NFC East team. But when you make a comment and you say that these guys are not athletes, you need to be schooled on this because these guys have to be. I've never seen, honestly, I've never seen a 300 or 400 pound man try to cram into one of these cars and stuff in drag race. You've got to be of a certain size. You have to be of a certain weight. Everything comes together with this. You have to do some weightlifting because you're handling a car that is, it's like a bullet going down that track. I mean, there's just no other way to say it. And then you've got to find a way. You better hope that your legs are good, and you better hope that your brakes are good when you're trying to stop because you've got all that momentum behind you and you want to stop before you hit the sand trap down at the end of the track. And then that's going to take an hour or so to dig you out after the safety net comes down. There's just so much. And I mean, it gets so hot inside of that car too. I mean, we're talking the temperatures were, in the, I guess 80s, probably the upper 70s to around the 80s or something on Saturday. But all that engine exhaust, everything coming off that heat coming off that engine and stuff, nitro put together with that in order to help them be able to spring off that line that much faster. Oh my gosh. I mean, you have to be really conditioned and practiced well to be able to pull something like this off.
The hand-eye coordination, the ability to
Oh
withstand those
yeah.
forces. I mean, everything about that is amazing to think. So,
You know what the guys do? I didn't know if you knew this. I didn't know this until this past weekend. Do you know what the guys do when they don't go back to the trailers just to sit around, have a cup of coffee, drink a beer or anything like that, or eat? They go back, and a lot of them get in there and they've got a Christmas tree, not a literal Christmas tree that we have in December, but what we call in the stock car racing thing, the tree. They've got a tree practice thing up. And these guys are going first thing. They walk in there and they get in their trailer, boom, they hit the button to see what their reaction time is when that light turns. And I think I mentioned this to you. The first thing that Antron Brown told me, he said, you don't wait to green. You go when that light's turning yellow, when it's going down the tree. You haven't got time to react once it's turned green. And he's right. I mean, I don't know how many times I was sitting up there and I was just practicing. I was doing this every time before they started the race. And that's what these guys do. They get in there and they practice because, hey, that's where that trigger finger's at. They've got to be ready. When that thing is ready to roll off the line, it's like lighting a rocket and taking off down through there is what it is. It's just a phenomenal experience that, it's not NASCAR, but, it's almost better than NASCAR in some ways because you get to see the drivers more. Tony Stewart, I don't know how many pictures I saw from other people and stuff from the track, I should say, of Tony Stewart, arms around people, having a big old time down there because a lot of people like Tony Stewart, and Tony Stewart was enjoying it. In NASCAR, we're kind of whisked away from that. We don't see that part of them. They're kind of like very private. They have to stay off by themselves. But these guys, they love to play the crowd, and they love the crowd too, and the crowd loves them. That says a lot about a sport.
Well, also it's one on one. I mean,
Yeah.
in this car you're driving around for 250, 500, 600 miles in some cases.
Yep.
And it's an endurance test, but in these races it's one on one, and you gotta. I mean, Tony Stewart, for all the acclaim, he finished 15th out of 16 in his division this weekend. So your name don't mean anything. You guys still go out there and perform.
Yeah, and he had some bad luck at one point in the semifinal round when they had the third and fourth round of qualifying on Saturday. There at one point he'd moved up to second on the list. He looked good. He looked like, hey, maybe he's been able to shake some things of this. And within just seconds, somebody else comes up to the line, and Buddy from second place, he's demoted down to like eighth or ninth really quick. And then at that point, he's demoted even further because I think the best comment came from Tony Schumacher this past weekend when he was talking about, and also Austin Prock. They were talking about at one time they used to have at least maybe two or three people that were really good in each class, whatever it might be. In funny car, it would have been John Force, Robert Height, probably Ron Capps. You throw a Matt Hagan in there from Christiansburg. You throw in that name in there. You might throw in a J.R. Todd. You might have about 4 or 5 in that class. Now you've expanded. You've got so many other different names in there. It makes it hard to be able to call it as to who could if they get the right setup. Bob Tasca the third, he's a guy that Ford Motorsports, he was driving the Dark Horse Mustang. I've seen great things out of him before. Nothing happened in this past weekend. And then Alexis DeJoria, she came over. She's been racing in one of the other circuits and what they have inside of NHRA. She came over in funny car, and now she's in funny car. She's actually doing pretty good. She was in, I don't know how many runoffs against Ron Capps this past weekend, but she held her own when she was racing there. And I mean, this was just a great weekend, I think, for some great racing. They had a capacity crowd in there on Saturday. A lot of people not there on Sunday because they didn't know how the weather was going to be, but Saturday, capacity crowd. They were really thrilled with what they saw on Saturday.
That's awesome. I love hearing about all this. This is all good. Well, let's transition a little bit to NASCAR. We got to talk about that's what we talk about each week. Another final lap guy running out of gas. I don't know how else to say it. Now he wasn't leading, but in the case, I mean, we just saw it again. We saw it last week. It again shows how much strategy plays into everything here. And it looked like I saw the pictures, Rod. It looked like it was Martin Truex Jr., right? It looked like
Right.
he was close to the finish line before he couldn't
Yeah,
get any
he
further.
wasn't far from the finish line, and it looked like something out of the movie Cars when you're watching there, and they're like he's struggling. Everybody else is buzzing by him and stuff, and they have a rule: they cannot go and help a fellow driver and push him across the start finish line. And here he is, and the car is just struggling. It's and what he's doing, he's firing up the starter along with getting some power, getting a boost every now and then to kind of get him across. And then finally he rolled across the line. I'm sure he got a standing ovation out of that one. But you'd hate for that, to happen, and especially like what happened to him and so forth. But the guy that we love to talk about so much, whose name will remain nameless all the time, but we'll just go ahead and say it anyway. It's a far cry from what happened to Denny Hamlin on Sunday. Denny Hamlin, 2 laps, engine blows for Joe Gibbs Racing. And for the first time, he doesn't finish. Let's see, I'm looking at this right now. Had snapped his streak of 5 consecutive top 5 finishes, is what he had. And he ended up being last in the 38 car field.
Yeah, it's for a guy in contention in the playoff for the playoff race. That's obviously not a good way to go out. Now on the other side, Kyle Larson, who for some reason, I mean, NASCAR took their sweet time, saying, okay, yeah, he gets the waiver. He's leading the points, so or he's leading the points now after this win, especially. But they left him and his team a little bit in limbo, even though we all knew NASCAR was going to give him the waiver before giving him the waiver, and then he goes out and wins the race, his third win of the season.
I think it's a form of punishment. And this is me. I think they made him wait. They made him stew. They made him sit there and sweat. They made Rick Hendrick and them, wondering whether or not they're going to grant him the waiver. Everybody knew to a certain degree, or, say, hey, give him that option, give him that option to having a waiver about it. But some of the stuff that we talked about there in the media center, and especially talking amongst us, it doesn't look good on NASCAR. And this is why I'm saying this. NASCAR just seemed to act like they didn't know what was going on that race of the Coca-Cola 600. Here they knew fully that the weather system was coming in. Okay. They went ahead and raced the race starting at the 5:30, 6 o'clock time that they normally start on Memorial Day weekend. They knew full well that rain was going to be in there. They knew full well that Kyle Larson was running late coming from Indy because of the length of the race at the Indy 500 and the rain delay there. They could have just about, if they had wanted to, they could have just about torpedoed his chances at a championship. But they knew better in the long run, because if they go and they don't grant him the waiver out of it, you lose favor with Rick Hendrick. You lose favor with some of the other teams and stuff through there. If this is what they're going to do. And funny thing about it, now it seems like the Pandora's box has been opened up. I think Ryan Blaney was asked, would he give it a shot and try to do the 2 for, and see what he could do on Memorial Day weekend, run at Daytona run at Indy and then run at Charlotte. And he said, if the situation was right. And so I guess it's a hint to Roger Penske. Hey, you may have another driver that's wanting to do this and pull this off. And then at the NHRA drags this past weekend, we got this impression. First, we got it last week that John Force said, I'm pretty much going to turn this over to Austin Prock. Well, he wasn't retiring. He wasn't going to retire. John Force is not going to retire anytime soon, but he baits it and he tells people, he says, I might run 25 more years in this sport. Then again, I may run 25 more days. Who knows how it's going to go? But then Austin Prock, here it is in front of him. Somebody asks John Force, would you do an IndyCar race or anything like that? He said, no, not me. He said, I'm not that crazy to get in a car like that. That was the first thing John Ford said. But then he brought up Austin Prock, and Austin Prock says, Yeah, if I could find me a ride. If I could find me a ride, could I do it? And John Force is like, yeah, I'm all for it. If you want to do it, go ahead. I'll support you in it and everything. He was there for the big race this past week, 2 weeks ago, that was at there at Charlotte or excuse me, at Indianapolis. And he got to meet a bunch of people. And I think Proc has kind of got the little indie bug. It's kind of bit him too. So we may have a whole lot more of some people joining these forces, before it's over with. And speaking of which, have you read the latest news about Dana White?
Probably not. No.
I did not know that Dana White, I knew that there was going to be an electric car series in NASCAR. They've been talking about this for a while. Last time I saw this, and this was on X, also known as Twitter, if you still want to call it that. But he had made the comment that he was on his way to Daytona Beach to sign the paperwork, as he will be sponsoring or having an input with NASCAR on an electric car series that will be showcased, and the season will begin for them. I think it's called a Nitro something car race or something like that, that's going to be in Richmond September 7th and 8th. And that's going to start the season for these electric cars. And I was shocked because, Dana White, doesn't he do UFC? Is that what
Yeah.
he's in charge
Yeah.
of? And
Yeah.
here he is. He is kind of diversifying himself and going into an electric car deal, part ways with NASCAR, looking for a little bit more of that, I guess, that shiny cloud, that other part of that cloud up there, what he's looking for right now to, spread his word a little bit more in the sport.
Yeah, gosh, the whole idea of electric car racing is quite interesting.
Yep.
You wouldn't you wouldn't have to do pit stops for gas. You'd have to do
Nope.
pit stops for a new battery.
Right.
Uh,
That's
I
it.
mean, that'd be interesting to see how that would all work. And how fast they could go. I mean, honestly, something like that too. If you're the electric car manufacturers out there, not just Tesla, but all the major companies are making electric cars now too. That'd be a way to sell cars. Hey, look, these
Yeah.
cars can race, they can go fast. All these things you hear about electric cars, not having very good range and not having any power. We can have power. They go on a track for 500 miles. There's a way to sell some more cars. So it's pretty smart actually when you think about it that way.
I know one person, a friend of mine, I do another podcast with. He has an electric car. He has a Tesla. He just raves by it, loves it. He says, you've never been in a car until you've been in an electric car. And I have yet to go and make the trip down, about an hour and a half down, to go and drive in that car and ride with him in that car. But here's the big question mark. There are a lot of people that seem like they almost, in a way, are already set that the lithium ion battery cars are not going to make it much, because guess where we have to get all the lithium from? China. And that is making it so difficult right now, I think, for a lot of these places to go and to really push this whole concept of electric cars. Because as far as I know there's no kind of big time lithium mining or anything in the United States. But, GM made the announcement at the end of last week that they hope to go all EV by 2034. And that's going to be their trucks, their cars, everything that they have. They hope to be all EV. And I'm like, I'm beginning to wonder if all of y'all have put your too many eggs in one basket, because I'm afraid that we'll see something else change before it's over with. Toyota's already playing around with a hybrid engine that runs on biofuel. And I can remember several years ago when Charlottesville, I think, was running the transit buses. They were
Mhm.
running it on biofuel, essentially grease, all that stuff mixed in with diesel. And I think the biggest complaint was everything smelled either like Chinese or French fries when the bus would go by in Charlottesville. So I don't know, but I would like to, I'd like to find out and see what it's really all about.
Yeah, it's and it just made me think, again, like thinking of this is a great way to sell cars. I mean, oh yeah, we'll have
Yeah.
races and we'll have drivers and teams,
Yep.
but And of course, I mean, half the NASCAR teams, it seems like, right, for years have always been guys who sell cars. So,
Yep.
and the manufacturers are involved to the degree they are. So, yeah, I'm not much of a fan of Dana White, but he's trying. He did that slap fight league thing that, or
Yep.
I guess he's still doing that, he says.
Right.
In addition to UFC and now this, yeah, it's
It could lend a new phrase to the vernacular in the world and stuff. It used to be the saying was win on Sunday, buy on Monday, I think's what it was. Well, for a lot of people, it's going to be win on Sunday, recharge on Monday.
yeah, there you
For a
go.
lot of these electric cars is what it could be. So
Yeah, every the supermarket just up the street, and I'm sure it might be the same where you are too. The supermarket for us that we go to, there is so they put in a two of the electric charging stations right there at the front a year or more ago.
mhm.
And then now, gosh, right out there at the back of the parking lot, there's like 8 or 10 or 12 of them out there now. So I mean, it's that's the world's changing. It's changing definitely, and
I kid you not. We had a grand opening of a new Food City store where I live, and Food City, of course, big sponsor of the NASCAR race in the spring and also the Xfinity race in the fall at Bristol. And this is no joke. There were people that just looked and they said, "What in the heck is that thing?"
yeah,
It's like they had no idea. And I told somebody, I said, electric charging thing for an electric car. And they said, how many people in Dickinson County has an electric car? And I think I could count on maybe one hand, two or three people
mhm.
probably have the electric cars. But the friend of mine that has the car down in Kingsport, he told me, he says, that's probably one of the bad ones. And I said, what do you mean by bad ones of the Chargers? He said, well, I don't mean they're bad. It's just that Food City's probably looking at making more money off of you by going into the store, staying there, letting that car charge for 3 hours, and you're going to spend ever how much money in 3 hours in the grocery store. So it's more business for
Yeah,
them, is the way
yeah,
we're looking at it. So it's not like the quick chargers that can recharge in what, 45 minutes or something like that, maybe
yeah.
something along that line. But still, yeah, it's changing. NASCAR is going to change. I don't know about drag racing just yet. Everybody's still having fun with drag racing. I don't see this happening for drag racing, especially, for such a short period of time shooting down the track and so forth. But yeah, just a reminder to you too. Also, I was going to tell you, don't forget you're going to have drag racing in your neck of the woods here in about 2 weeks.
Where's that?
It's going to be up there at Richmond. They are going to be
Oh yeah,
having a
yeah,
there at Virginia NHRA Nationals at Virginia Motorsports Park there in Richmond or outside of Richmond. And so they're going to be having that in 2 weeks, June 22nd and 23rd. So there's going to be some drag racing action up your way. That'd be fun for you to go to.
if I'm not in Omaha still,
Right.
which we'll wrap the show up by talking about that. So yeah, yeah, I saw in your story about the Richmond. Yeah, I'll be in Omaha. I'm leaving Wednesday. We're recording this on Monday, so
Mhm.
so three teams with local interest for us already punching their tickets to Omaha of the eight that'll be there. Virginia, of course, for me. I was in Charlottesville this past weekend for the Super Regional UVA, taking two straight from Kansas State. Tennessee is as expected. They were the number one overall national
Right.
seed, but they did have to play a third game with Evansville after Evansville beat them in game two. But Tennessee blew Evansville away in game three. And Kentucky also in the a super regional win, now headed to the World Series after a two-game sweep of Oregon State. So hey, I mean, for where you live, Rod, right there in the tri-state area, that's I'm sure there's some good spirited, hopefully back and forth going between Virginia fans, Tennessee fans, Kentucky fans.
Well, hey, don't forget North Carolina too. Even though Chapel Hill's located a little bit further
That's
east,
true. Yeah,
I know there's a lot of Tar Heel fans, a little bit south of me and so forth, and they love their Tar Heels. Sorry, I was about to say something else there since I don't like the Tar Heels that much.
and that's who we play in the first game, so I don't like
I
them
know I
either.
better be careful what I say and stuff. But yeah, within that, Kentucky's a little bit of a surprise. I don't think a lot of people expected Kentucky to be in this. But Kentucky, this is their first time ever in a
Yeah.
college World Series. And for Tennessee, this is just another trip back. For Virginia, it's another trip back. But for Virginia, they're still of the thing of we've got business to take care of. We didn't get a chance to prove it last time around. We lost two straight, had to go home. I think they've got a lot to prove this time around. And we were talking about the pitching and so forth of what's going on there with Virginia. I know that at times it seems like Virginia's pitching has been kind of weak. They've allowed a lot of hits, or they've allowed some hits, but hey, you've got to give credit to Woolfolk in that one game that he played. I don't think there were a lot of people that had a lot of, I don't know, hope with him out on the mound, and he literally smoked just about everybody that was there that stepped up to the plate. He smoked just about everybody that was there.
The Virginia team this year, going in about a week before the NCAA tournament started, their team ERA was near 6.00.
Yeah.
I just did a quick math in my head. They've given up 16 runs total in 5 games.
Yeah.
And at least one of those runs was unearned. I have to do the math on this, but their team ERA is around 3 for this
Mhm.
postseason. So they have improved there. Jay Woolfolk 2-0 in the postseason after losing a starting rotation job earlier
Yep.
in the year. They Virginia plays Carolina in the first game. The next round is a double elimination bracket, two double elimination brackets, and then the winners of those play in the championship series. It's interesting. The Virginia, Carolina, Tennessee, and Florida State are all in the same bracket. So a lot of familiar folks. Virginia's played Tennessee in the World Series. That was 3 years ago. They met in the first game of the World Series. So there's a little bit of history there.
Yep.
Uh, Certainly, Virginia played Carolina in Charlottesville earlier in the season, back in April. Took 2 out of 3. Also played Florida State in a one-game scenario in the ACC tournament. Lost that game to Florida State.
Mhm.
So there's history there with those teams. But man, I'll tell you what, I got to go last year for the first time. Um, and I'm so looking forward to going back. Omaha is it's just a great the city, the whole region is so
Mhm.
embracing. They welcome fans in. And also the cool part of this, I like the College World Series even more than a Final Four. I've been to a Final Four when Virginia won the championship a few years ago. But the College World Series, the fans tend to be from groups. I mean, we mentioned Tennessee is a regular.
Right.
Carolina was a regular. They haven't been back for a while, but they used to be there every other year for a while too. Um, Florida State is a regular team that goes
Mhm.
there. You mentioned Kentucky is this will be their first appearance. Um, but a lot of these groups come back every year, and because of that, they all know the area really well. Each team seems to have its own bar. It's kind of fun.
Mhm.
Virginia has a place that you go
Yep.
to because it's the Virginia bar at Omaha,
Right.
and each group does this, and so and no everybody there's rooting for everybody else. It's not like going to a college football game, which is the worst,
Yep.
where everybody's just been drinking all day and they want to fight all night. The baseball fans are all rooting for each other, and that kind of thing. So it's a great place to go. It's a great environment. And then, yeah, now I'm hoping this year I get to go and see a couple wins out of the Virginia team.
It's kind of civilized.
Yeah,
Baseball is
yeah.
more civilized, I guess, than anything else. But hey, you're talking about that. I wish you luck on that, and hope Virginia comes back. I mean, hey, we were talking about this. They could be there, depending on how they win and stuff. You could be there for a 2 week haul, couldn't you?
I could either be there like last year, Virginia lost its first 2 games, and so they were out. It's a double elimination in the first part. So I was there Friday, Sunday, and I probably came home Monday night. So I was only there for a few days. But I'm flying out Wednesday. If they go all the way,
Mhm.
I would be there for one day short of 2 weeks. So
Wow.
yeah, that's the
Well,
that's the hard part. A lot, they get their fans. I mean, the
right.
stadium holds 25 or 26,000. There will be 25 or 26 for every game. But
Yeah.
just thinking about how you've got to commit. I mean, if you're going to go with your team, you got to be able to take 2 weeks off work.
Yeah, you do. That's
Now,
that's true.
for me, it's work.
Yeah.
Like, watching baseball for me. I'm a very lucky person. I get to count that as my job. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's a challenge. But there will be lots of fans who are there, and then there and people can come in and come out. I'm hearing from some people who say, "Hey, if Virginia makes it to the championship series, that doesn't start until Saturday, June 22nd. Maybe I'll just get out there, right before that." And that happens. There are people
Yeah.
who do that too. So. Oh, but it's so much fun. I had so much, even though Virginia was 0-2 last year, and I was only there for 4 or 5 days. A lot of fun, and I just now, if they can win a game or two and extend my stay, it'll be interesting.
It's the same thing on the racing part with you. I mean, about baseball with me. Uh, I like racing. I love racing. I have ever since I was younger. I'm just thankful I've got a platform that I'm able to go and uh, using this kind of term, you're kind of like the small fish in this big ocean, mingling with all these big media people and things like that. And then you see the drivers, and then you see all this other stuff that's going on. And you meet a lot of friends. That's one good thing about it. You meet a lot of good friends out of it. But you also get to see a lot of great things that, you know, there would be a lot of people who would give anything in the world to be where you're at, to be able to sit there, be in the media center, to be out there in the center of the track. And I'm not talking about the guys that go and bring the autograph cards by and force the drivers to sit down there and give out about 20 or 30 John Hancocks right there within so much time. I'm talking about getting to know people. That's the best thing in the world for me. That's what I've enjoyed, I think, most about doing all this stuff with racing is you get to meet a lot of different people. You get to participate in a lot of different things, and it's an inclusive family, so to speak. And it's just something that I've really enjoyed, and got you and Crystal to thank for giving me a shot on being able to do that and stuff. It's something I never dreamed possible that I'd ever be back to doing the sport, but yeah, I am. Here I am now. So
They're all great experiences, I tell you. You're right. The best part to me is meeting the new people.
mhm.
You sit beside somebody in a press row, they assign your seats, and then you're chatting with somebody that you probably never would have otherwise ever seen or heard of
Right.
or communicate with in any way. And for a day or two or however long it ends up being, a couple hours, whatever it may end up being, you're able to learn from people. To me, that's the best part.
Yeah, that is.
I soak it all up, man. That's the cool thing for me.
Same way I do it. I soak it all up and just enjoy it while I've got the chance, because I may never be able to do it again the next day. I may never be able to do it again. We don't know, what the future holds or anything, but at least I can say, before I go, if whatever happens to me, I can say, hey, I was at Bristol. I was at Bristol the night that so and so, all this stuff happened. And yeah, it's memories definitely to look back on.
You can't pay for the experience. You can't. Nobody can give you enough money to
No.
take all the experiences away. So,
Yeah.
that's the cool part.
Yep.
Well, Rod, as always, thank you for your time, your insight, and next week when we talk, I'll be sitting in Omaha, so I'll connect on the long line. But
Yeah.
until then, have a great week.
All right. You too. Appreciate it.